There we go. So, what's up, Internet? This is John from the Internet, and one of the coolest things that with this new kind of rig that I've created is you get to. I'm gonna take a video of this. You can actually, with this GorillaPod Joby thing, see how I can set it up right here underneath my desk, and it kind of just sits. So you can get very creative. Man, what a mess over here. Anyway, you can create. You can set it up in very creative ways. That's all I wanted to say. And that's what I'm doing right now. Anyway, so I'll see if I can add that to the video in post-processing. But anyway, I just wanted to talk to you about dysfunction. And no, not my dysfunction. Well, actually, yes. But also, I'm talking about team dysfunction. I wrote a blog post about this today, very short. And essentially took a look at this old worksheet that I have called the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And this is based on Patrick Lencioni's very famous book titled The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And in my blog post today, which I'll link in the description below, I just mentioned how I've used this framework or this line of thinking countless times, mostly because it's so much easier to say and talk about these things than it is to actually put it into practice. And we all know this because trusting other people is essentially the hardest thing ever. I don't really think there are many things harder than to trust another human being completely. And I'm trying to think of an analog, really, but we trust a lot of things in our lives very naturally. We trust a lot of things even without thinking. Maybe at one point we didn't, but very quickly we moved into a very comfortable place of trust. For instance, perhaps like a chair, right? I trust without thinking that a chair is going to hold my weight and I'm not going to fall down and bust my ass. But at some point in our life, we didn't trust a chair. And that probably happened very much earlier in life, and we can't even remember a time when we didn't trust that a chair would in fact hold our weight. But we do now. This is obviously not the same thing as trusting another human being. And then, of course, in the context of a much larger relational dynamic like a team, a high-performance functional team, it's really hard. And that's the foundation of this model is trust. Everything built on trust, and everything works up. But I wanted to, and on the backside is this overview of the model, which I enumerate in my blog post, again, linked in the description below. But I really want to meditate on this because it's something that I constantly struggle with. It's because, again, as I mentioned, it's easier to say this than to actually practice it, and it's really hard to get this right. So what I thought I'd do, maybe for my own benefit, but perhaps for you, I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to kind of talk through it, and maybe we can have some chats. But and I apologize really because I want to give credit where credit is due. I'm not entirely sure where I got this, but this is a worksheet, something I did in a previous environment and for a previous team, and this paper's got to be old. It might be 5 or 6 or 7 years old. Anyway, a quick overview of the model. And I know that all of you, we all can empathize with this because we're all a part of a number of different teams in our lives, personally and professionally, and we all know how hard this really is. As difficult as teamwork can be to achieve, it is not complicated. And every time I read that, I'm like, oof, it's not complicated. And it's really not. Like, teamwork is not a complex thing, but it's so hard to get right. It's like, I don't know. I'm not thinking of a very good analog here. My main thought was like shooting a basketball, but I think that's actually a fairly complex process. Anyway, and so if I can't describe it in a page or two, then I've probably made it too complex. Here it goes. The true measure of a team is that it accomplishes the results that it sets out to achieve. To do that on a consistent, ongoing basis, a team must overcome the 5 dysfunctions listed here by embodying the behaviors described for each one. Number 1. Dysfunction number 1, absence of trust. Members of great teams trust one another on a fundamental emotional level, and they are comfortable being vulnerable with each other about their weaknesses, mistakes, fears, and behaviors. They get to a point where they can be completely open with one another without filters. Okay, so let's just like sit on that for a second. Members of great teams. So I think you and I can both agree that we want to work with and for great teams. I mean, what's the point of working for and with mediocre teams, right? That would be like purposely joining a mediocre team for what reason? I don't know. Anyway, yes, we all want to work for great teams, great teams. But a great team is one that trusts each other on a fundamental emotional level and are comfortable being vulnerable with each other about their weaknesses and mistakes, fears, and behaviors. Whew. That's heavy. And then this is, again, why trust is the foundational part of this model, is because nothing else works if you can't get this right. The problem is the first dysfunction is so massively difficult to do well that very few organizations, very few teams ever get to greatness because they can't get over the first one. And that's where I think most people get stuck. That's where I get stuck, is how can I learn? How can I practice? How can I get to a point where I can trust my team members at a fundamental emotional level? Be able to be honest and open about my weaknesses, my mistakes, fears, and behaviors. And even as I'm saying that, right, I'm thinking, there's no fucking way. Like, there's no fucking way that anyone in their right mind would want to really do that. And as authentic and honest as I might be with all of you on my vlog, let's be honest. You are not sitting right here with me, obviously, like in real life. It's me communicating with you, and we're having a little bit of a dialogue or chat via the internet, which is great. I love it. But you get to see my physical and emotional responses on my face and in my body language. I gesticulate a lot, but I don't get to see you. And I think that's a huge part of like connecting with someone emotionally, is to be able to understand their body language and to be able to interpret it right. But like, no one wants to talk about their weaknesses, mistakes, fears, and bad behaviors, right? Because that's super uncomfortable. Why would you? You don't even want to do that with people that you love and respect and that know you really well. I'll just give you an example, right? So the reason why this is so important to me is because I've been recently struggling with this in the last few weeks. As our team grows, as our team gets farther down the road, as this thing becomes much more serious in nature, as we continue to build steam and build this great product, the pressure continues to grow. And that's a good pressure. That's a very positive thing, I think. But with it comes a lot of, additional challenges. And as the CEO, as the leader of this organization, it is my job to empower my team to do their very best, which means I have to give up control. There's something that within me that needs to die, and that is the controlling nature of who I am and my role, and the fact that I started this and was there at the beginning, but as the team grows, I have to give that up. That's really, really hard. It means I have to trust them. But it also implies, right, when you think about it, me giving this up, it implies in a number of different ways that I'm not good. I'm not as good at certain things as these other people on the team are. And as easy as that is to say, it's sometimes difficult for me and maybe for you to admit. Now, I think at this point in my life, I'm fairly comfortable with admitting that most of the things in life I'm pretty shitty at. Like, there are very, very few things that I'm even remotely decent at. And in fact, like, if I were to enumerate those things, the first thing that comes up that I can say, that I can feel pretty confident about saying, like, to you and publicly, that I'm pretty good at, is I'm pretty good at just doing stuff and, like, starting. I'm pretty good at starting. And that's about it. Doesn't mean that I'm, like, even good. Like, the things that I start are actually very good, but I'm very good at starting things. Like, taking the first step towards a goal. And again, that step might be a terrible, like, first stab, but I'm good at least trying. And what I've realized is that most people really struggle with that first step for a number of different reasons, mostly valid reasons, actually. But for whatever reason, there's something within me that just, I'm okay with kind of jumping off the proverbial cliff a little bit more often than not. But that applies to projects, but not necessarily like relationships. It's harder for me to take the first step towards someone and to trust them and be comfortable, like, admitting to their face my weaknesses, the mistakes, and the fears that I have. Although I shared one yesterday, or not the other day, I shared one in my last vlog about my biggest fear, which is relational driven. Anyway, the point of all of that is that you and I know how difficult it is to trust other people. Going back to my example. So if this doesn't show how difficult it is, at least in kind of my context, then I don't know what, but I have partnered and co-founded a company with my twin brother. Okay, so we've known each other for almost 4 decades. I know him better than really anyone else on the planet. We have a lot of trust. It's probably as good as it gets. But still, there are things within me, there's things within him that I'm still like, I don't know if I can trust him with that information. It's crazy, right? But then I also have another person on my team who's amazing. I've known her for 16, 17, 18 years. And she's, like, amazing. She's an amazing person. I've worked with her professionally, so it's not like I don't know her from so many different angles. I went to school with her, and yet I still struggle to trust her completely with not just the small tasks, but the large tasks and everything in between, because I'm imperfect, because I'm insecure, because there's a lot of anxiety when you try to make that relationship really, really, really functionally work, and if you really try to apply like that at a fundamental emotional level, am I okay with letting this person essentially have access to the very root of my being? And in so many ways, the way that I think about trust is giving someone a weapon and saying, here you go. here is this weapon that can do incredible amount of harm. And oh, by the way, here is my biggest weak spot. This is my Achilles heel. This is the place where you can do the biggest amount of damage right here in my heart. Here's the weapon, right? Have at it. I don't know if that metaphor or analogy makes sense, but it's essentially handing someone a loaded weapon, a loaded pistol, and saying, I'm giving you all the rights and privileges to totally annihilate me, but I trust that you won't. Because giving you this is important. It's important to demonstrate how much I trust you and how far I'm willing to go to make this relationship really amazing. And then, of course, the larger context to make this team awesome is I'm going to admit my fears, my weaknesses, my bad behavior to you, and know that you can do some incredible damage with that information. But I'm going to do it anyway because the outcause, the possible positive outcome that can come from that is so overwhelmingly good that I'm willing to risk being hurt by you and by giving you that piece of information or those pieces of information so that we can do greater work together. Anyway, most teams, they never get past the first dysfunction. And even if you do, you still end up going back to that because life is complex and people are difficult to manage and relationships are difficult to manage. And anyway, so I'm going to keep going on and we'll go through this, but obviously sitting on number 1 is huge. Dysfunction number 2, fear of conflict. Teams that trust one another are not afraid to engage in passionate dialogue around issues and decisions that are key to the organization's success. They do not hesitate to disagree with, challenge, and question one another, all in the spirit of finding the best answers, discovering the truth, and making great decisions. Something that my wife and I talk about often is, especially as parents, and in terms of parenting, is the difference between trying to make a point and trying to make a difference. I'm going to say that again. Trying to make a point versus trying to make a difference. And the nuance can be so small. The distance between those two things can be so small at times. It's really hard at times to know which one you're actually doing, but you feel it, right? Like when you're having an argument with someone or you're trying to tell someone, give them some feedback, you may catch yourself and saying, okay, what I'm really trying to do here is make a point. And I'm going to do everything I can to make this point and get this point across, which includes me like hurting their feelings or making them feel really shitty or making them feel like they're less than. And instead of presenting the information in a way that helps make a difference, which may mean that you share specific information that in a way that encourages them, right? That restores the relationship, that helps move things positively forward instead of just making sure that all the information that you have in your head and maybe in your heart gets out. This is especially important, I think, in parenting because we want to make a difference in their lives and their decision making, help them make the best decisions possible instead of just making a point and making sure that, like, hey, I'm the parent, you're the kid, I'm right, you're wrong. It's not binary. It's almost never binary, right? Because it's a relationship, and a relationship isn't just distinctly binary. It's about respect and love and supporting the person physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, right? And sometimes the best answer in the context of being a parent is not actually what you say, but what you do. And so I can think of so many different ways, and even my very limited experience as a parent, with a 12 and a 7, almost 8, and now a 1-year-old, is that a hug can cure a multitude of problems. And it can cover a multitude of sin. Right? Sometimes a really, really big, juicy hug is the most important thing that you can do for a child. Instead of a long lecture or trying to explain something difficult or trying to like work through some like object lesson, right? Those teachable moments are so rare. And sometimes I think we can, I think sometimes even as an employer, I can try to force a teachable moment when rather it's just better to shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up. Just be quiet. Relax. And for some people, like this dysfunction number 2, the fear of conflict, right? The fear of conflict. Some people really like conflict. And they almost like are looking for it. Maybe you have worked for a boss that's like that. Those people are the worst, right? It's almost like anything you say, regardless of how positive it might be, like at a very fundamental, like a level, like they find a way to just poo-poo it. And they just want to pick a fight. And obviously and that only that only has to happen a handful of times where you realize, okay, I don't trust this person. So you go all the way back to square one, right? And you're like, I'm not gonna conflict with that person because I don't trust them. I don't trust them with my feelings. I don't trust them with giving them information because they're just gonna shit all over it, and they're gonna feel great, I guess. Maybe they're gonna feel bad, but I'm definitely gonna feel bad, and that's the last time I'm doing that. That's the last time I'm being honest with my feelings. That's the last time I'm sharing the things that I'm struggling with. That's the last time, fill in the blank. Only needs to happen once. And I'm pretty fucking guilty of that, to be honest. Because I don't really mind conflict. No, that's not true. I do. Anyway, dysfunction number 3. Lack of commitment. Teams that engage in unfiltered conflict are able to achieve genuine buy-in around important decisions, even when various team members initially disagree. That's because they ensure all opinions and ideas are put on the table and considered, giving confidence to team members that no stone has been left unturned. Very critical. Something that we actually recently talked about as a team was being able to publicly support but privately dialogue. In other words, like anything we do as an organization publicly, we're going to support each other. But privately, we can feel like we can dogpile all we want and get in each other's face and argue and stuff like that. Another thing that I also appreciate with my previous teams and with this team right now is like that we can disagree and commit. And that's a huge thing. It's okay if we disagree with implementation or direction, but at some point we have to come to a consensus and we have to commit to it. And even if we don't all agree, that's okay, because going all the way back to 1, we trust each other. And for some of you, you may know that, you may actually be struggling with your existing team, is that no one really is committing to anything. It's vastly easier for your whatever, in the context of your team or organization, just to sit on the fence, because you don't want to create any conflict, you don't want to serve any controversy, right? You don't want to get yelled at by your boss. You're just going to kind of like quietly sit in your lane and just hope someone else will like foolishly make a commitment, and everyone's going to dog on them later. Dysfunction number 4, avoidance of accountability. Teams that commit to decisions and standards of performance do not hesitate to hold one another accountable for adhering to those decisions and standards. What is more, they don't rely on the team leader as the primary source of accountability. They go directly to their peers. Whew, man, could we sit and talk about accountability for days? Accountability, like real authentic accountability, is ridiculously difficult to come by. it's a topic, it's a word that's passed around like water. Which has made it so, when I hear like, let's keep each other accountable, like especially in some circles, like spiritual circles, or if you're like a Christ follower, you'll hear about like spiritual accountability, like for your moral and ethical behavior. It's like so much nonsense. It's just so much bullshit. And I just want to like smack the person. I'm like, there's no fucking way you're keeping that person accountable. Like, exactly how are you keeping that person accountable? Are you going to pray for them? Like, that's not accountability. You're going to meet with them once a month? Okay, like, that doesn't really happen and doesn't work. Like, so what I've done personally is I've kind of removed that language from a lot of my own personal vernacular. I don't tell people like, yeah, I'm just going to keep you accountable. Like, I think advocacy is actually a stronger word. I think it also implies action, and I want to advocate for people, and I want to find the right kind of cadence and relationship that works. But there are some people that I'll meet once a year for whatever reason. I'm not keeping those people accountable. Like, let's just be honest. What I am doing is I'm an advocate for them, and I do invest a little bit of my time into their lives, and vice versa, and they invest back into me. And we're here to support, but I think there's this like nice, very explicit social contract, but it's not accountability. It's just bullshit. Anyway, soapboxing. Hashtag soapboxing. Okay, so number 5. Dysfunction number 5, inattention to results, right? And all this builds on top of each other. Teams that trust one another, there we go, engage in conflict, commit to decisions, hold one another accountable, and are very likely to set aside their own individual needs and agendas to focus almost exclusively on what is best for the team. They do not give into the temptation to place their departments, career aspirations, or ego-driven status ahead of the collective results that define team success. And one of the great things about this last one, dysfunction, is you clearly know if you're a great functional team, if you consistently are committed to other people's success and the team's success. You can do this on a personal level. You can kind of gut your check yourself, but then you can generally you have a pretty good barometer reading, like when you can observe observable behavior, when people are making decisions that are obviously in their own best self-interest, which makes a lot of sense because I think we're all naturally gravitate to doing that. But it's also very obvious and I think very clear when you see someone make a decision where their best interests are in second place. And so you can almost like reverse engineer, kind of back your way in and say, okay, like because we were dysfunctional number 5, okay, it probably snowballs all the way back down to 1. There's an absence of trust. It doesn't mean that there's trust less. It doesn't mean that we don't have trust. It just means there's an absence or a critical component of the trust, pie, if you will, that is missing. And, it's not perfect trust. And that might be impossible anyway. But it's not to a point where it's functional. Anyway, I think about this all the time. And I think I just want to encourage you to go to the blog post, download this, copy it, print it out, whatever. And I have the text written out so you can copy and paste it and stuff, whatever. But anyway, I wanted to share that with you because I'm struggling with it. It's hard for me to trust even the people that I know the best and have known me the longest. Because I think there's something broken in me. There's still great insecurity. There's anxiety around giving these things up because I want to be in control. I have control issues, I think, like anyone else. And to a certain degree, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit about. It's like a defense mechanism. in a way. Because when you think about it, like, if I'm in complete control, then I'm also responsible for the results. And if the results are shitty, I can only blame myself, and that's good. I don't want to blame anyone else. I don't want to be bitter or upset with anyone else. I just don't want that in my life. No one wants that. But the problem with that is that you end up being a very lonely person. Is because your life is essentially controlled by you and for you, and you realize after a while that you're alone and you're super lonely all the time and you have no friends, and that sucks, and that's not the way to do life. You need to do life with other people, and you should, and you don't need a lot of people. I don't have a lot of super great deep relations. I only have a few, but that's all I need. But I need those people. Otherwise, life would totally suck. And so this is the interesting, internal conflict, right? Where I want to control things, but when I control things, it ends up being super lonely. And sometimes I get exactly what I want, and what I want is not what is really good for me. I really think that's actually something that I think most of us totally miss out on, totally forget, or maybe we haven't lived long enough to really appreciate this truth. But if you're really selfish, it means that you want to be in complete maximal control, and you're going to get what you want. And it's not going to be as good as you imagine. It's going to be actually pretty sad. And once you get it, there's going to be this incredibly hollow sense and feeling that, wow, I did all of that work and I'm the only one celebrating. And in fact, this is not nearly as good as I thought it was going to be. And wow, what the fuck did I just do with my time? What did I do with my life? And we hear about this with older folks who have spent a large part of their life trying to solo it. And at the end of their life, they're like, what do I have to show for this? I was telling this to someone else the other day, where I said, what am I really trying to achieve with this company? Outside of obviously some very positive result in return for my financial partners, et cetera, et cetera. What will I really have to show at the end of this project? And I told them what I really will have to show is what will be left over when all the dust settles. Any of my projects, regardless of venture funded or not, private, side project, whatever, what will I really have when everything fades away? And it's going to be relationships. And those relationships are even going to be super positive and healthy and in a really good place that I'm going to be proud of, or they're going to be hollow, superficial, non-existent. Maybe a bunch of folks will pat me on the back, but they won't be friends. They'll be grateful that you did a good job, but that was your job. That was what you were supposed to do. And you can only get so many pats on the back for doing what you were supposed to do, right? Fuck the participation culture that we live in. You get a trophy just because you participated. Fuck that. Forget that entirely. What we're going to have at the end of the day is healthy, positive relationships or not. And that's what this is all about. That's what this framework is all about when you really think about it. It's if you can't learn to trust your team that you work with all the time, then you're missing out on a fundamental part of life, which is great, healthy, growing relationships. And your team and your company, the one that you're in right now, is a place for you to practice that in a very visceral, pragmatic, functional way. And if you can't get good at this, if you can't get better at this, and I'm speaking to myself, I need to take my own medicine. If I can't figure this out, then my life is going to be really shitty. And it's going to suck. And at the end of my days, on my deathbed, I'm going to be like, man, I have a lot of regrets. I did that wrong. and we only have one shot at this. So that's why I meditate and think about things like this. This is why I write about it. This is why I reflect on it. This is why I'm sharing it with you, is we have to get this right. We can't be dysfunctional team members. We can't be dysfunctional community members. We can't be dysfunctional relationship people, right? And we have to practice. And so wherever you are, this is an opportunity to practice. Hopefully that resonates. This vlog is super long, but I don't care. And if you've made it all the way, would love your thoughts in the comments below. What are you working on? Does this resonate? How do you think about this? Give me your thoughts, love them. Anyway, hope you have a great rest of the day. That's it for me. Now it's gonna take like 5 hours for me to render this, but whatever. Love you guys. See you guys online. Peace.